10 R&B firings that backfired so badly the groups never recovered. Each of these groups had a voice, a sound that was the reason people showed up, the presence that held everything together. And then came the decision, the vote, the meeting where someone decided that voice was replaceable. It was not. 10 R&B firings that the groups who made them never recovered from. Every name on this list earned a proper telling. This is that telling. Number 10, Royce / Gwen Dickey. She was discovered in 1975, singing in a club in Miami. Word reached Norman Whitfield, the man who produced for the Temptations, for Marvin Gaye, for Gladys Knight, and he flew her to Los Angeles. She auditioned. She got the call. He gave her a stage name, Rose Norwalt, because he was building something and he needed her voice at the center of it. The group was called Royce. In 1976, with Gwen Dickey's voice on the track, they released Car Wash. It reached number 1 on the Hot 100. It won a Grammy Award for Best Score Soundtrack Album. Their follow-up album, Royce II in Full Bloom, went platinum, topped the R&B chart, and peaked at number 9 on the Billboard 200. This was not a small group. This was one of the most powerful soul acts in America. Wishing on a Star, Love Don't Live Here Anymore, I Wanna Get Next to You. These songs exist because of that voice. And then, in April of 1980, Gwen Dickey was gone. The internal tensions between her and the group's management had made staying impossible. What had been her platform had become something she could no longer call her own. She left, and she took with her the one thing that had always been exclusively hers, her voice. Royce temporarily disbanded. They regrouped. They tried other lead singers. They found an audience in the United Kingdom. But in America, the silence was immediate, and it did not lift. And Gwen Dickey? In 1998, 18 years after she walked out, Jay-Z recorded a song built around Wishing on a Star. That is how valuable her legacy remained. Long after the group had stopped mattering commercially, her voice was still being sampled by the biggest names in the industry. The voice they could not hold became the song an entire generation carried, without knowing her name. And if this name is new to you, that is not your fault, but it does not have to stay that way. Number 9, Shalamar / Jody Watley and Jeffrey Daniel. Let me tell you who Jody Watley and Jeffrey Daniel were before I tell you what happened to them. They were teenagers when they started dancing on Soul Train. 16, 17 years old, two of the most recognized faces on that stage, not performing as artists, dancing, and Don Cornelius noticed. In 1977, he pulled them from the dance floor and placed them in a group that would become Shalamar. When Howard Hewitt joined as lead vocalist in 1979 and the classic lineup was formed, something real happened. Jody Watley had grown into a genuine vocalist. Jeffrey Daniel brought choreography and physical presence that no one else in R&B could replicate. And together with Hewitt, the three of them made music that defined an era. The second time around reached number 1 on the R&B chart. A Night to Remember, I Can Make You Feel Good, Dead Giveaway, These are cornerstone records of early 1980s R&B. If that music was in your house growing up, you already understand what I am saying. And then, in 1983, the label and the management made a choice. Howard Hewitt was the star. Jody and Jeffrey were the support. The best material went to Hewitt. The decisions belonged to others, and when Jody and Jeffrey began to push back against the margins they had been assigned, the facilities closed, so they left. What Shalamar produced after their departure, one notable hit in 1984, Dancing in the Sheets, from the Footloose soundtrack, which peaked at number 17, and then nothing. Jody Watley moved to England. She spent 4 years finding out who she was outside of a structure that had sidelined her. In 1987, her debut solo album came out on MCA Records. Looking for a New Love, Don't You Want Me, Some Kind of Lover, 3 top 10 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. In 1988, Jody Watley won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist. Best New Artist. She had been building for 11 years, but the industry was finally paying attention to what Shalamar's management had chosen not to see. And I want to say something before we move forward, because it matters for what is coming. There is one group on this list that made this kind of mistake not once, but twice. The same organization, the same pattern of decision. Within 3 years, they let 2 irreplaceable voices walk away. And the second loss was the one that ended the era people still mourn. We will get there.
Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it.
Number 8, En Vogue / Dawn Robinson. Dawn Robinson was not a supporting member of En Vogue. She was a founding member. In 1989, producers Denzel Foster and Thomas McElroy auditioned hundreds of women and selected 4. Dawn was one of those 4, and what she brought was irreplaceable in a way that would only become fully clear once it was gone. Her voice, a raspy, pitch-perfect soprano with a rock edge underneath, gave En Vogue its texture. She sang lead on My Lovin', You're Never Gonna Get It. She sang lead on Giving Him Something He Can Feel. She sang Free Your Mind, the record that won 2 MTV Video Music Awards in 1992, and announced to the world that this group was something different. Their debut album went platinum in 1990. Funky Divas went multi-platinum in 1992. From 1990 to 1996, En Vogue was one of the most commercially dominant girl groups in the history of R&B. And then came 1997. They were in the final stages of their 3rd album. They were coming off Don't Let Go, Love, which went number 1 worldwide in 1996, platinum certified, their biggest commercial moment to date. You know that song. It has been part of the soundtrack of an entire generation. But knowing the song and knowing what it cost to make it, those are 2 different kinds of knowing. Let me give you the second one. In March of 1997, as the album neared completion, Dawn Robinson was locked in a contract dispute that had reached a stalemate. She later stated that despite selling tens of millions of albums, the members were receiving only 2 cents per record. The negotiations did not move, and so she walked. En Vogue continued as a trio. They released EV3. The albums that followed never reached what came before. The sound was different. Her former bandmates would later confirm, in their own words, that her voice was noticeably missed, that it was distinctly unique from the others. And I want to be precise about this. Noticeably missed is what they said in interviews. What they meant is that some sounds cannot be replaced by a different sound. They can only be absent. Dawn Robinson's voice was absent, and it showed. Number 7, Xscape / Kandi Burruss. I want you to hold this name carefully, because this story is not always told correctly. Kandi Burruss was a teenager in College Park, Georgia, when she began singing with Tiny Cottle and sisters LaTocha and Tamika Scott. They were discovered at a birthday party by Jermaine Dupri and signed to his So So Def label. From 1993 to 1998, the group released 3 platinum albums: Just Kickin' It, Understanding, Who Can I Run To? These were not fringe hits. These were defining records of 1990s R&B, and Kandi Burruss helped build every one of them. But Kandi was also a songwriter, and that is the part of this story that changes everything. As the label positioned LaTocha Scott as the group's primary lead, and as a romantic entanglement between Kandi and Jermaine Dupri created fault lines the group could not repair, the internal structure collapsed. By the time their 3rd album was done, Kandi was gone, and I will say clearly what most people will not. What happened to Kandi Burruss inside Xscape was not about her voice. It was about who controlled the creative direction. And when control moved away from her, the thing that had made the group worth listening to moved with her. What Xscape did after Kandi left, they released a single in 2005 that did not chart. They reunited. They dissolved. They reunited again. Kandi Burruss, in the meantime, wrote No Scrubs for TLC. She wrote Bills, Bills, Bills for Destiny's Child. She wrote There You Go for Pink. Later, she received songwriting credits on Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored by Ariana Grande, and Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. In the year 2000, Kandi Burruss won the Grammy Award for Best R&B Song. For writing No Scrubs, that is the songwriter Xscape couldn't afford to push aside. That is the creative intelligence they let walk out the door. And without it, there was no more Xscape, only a name and a memory of what that name had once meant. Number 6, The Temptations / Eddie Kendricks. He did not join the Temptations. He co-founded them from the time they were called the Primes, singing in Birmingham, Alabama, before anyone outside of Detroit had heard of them. His falsetto was the sound of their earliest and most essential identity, the way you do the things you do. Get ready? A voice so precise and so light that it seemed to float above everything the music was doing underneath it. When producer Norman Whitfield pushed the group toward a harder, psychedelic direction in the late 1960s, Eddie Kendricks grew uncomfortable. He did not recognize himself in the new sound. The romantic ballads that were his natural territory, the songs that made people feel something quiet and deep, had been replaced by something he had not agreed to become. Tensions built. In November of 1970, during a run at New York's Copacabana nightclub, Kendricks walked off after the first show and did not return. It was mutually decided. He was done. He left one last gift on his way out. Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me, reached #1 on the Billboard pop charts in April of 1971. By that time, Eddie Kendricks had already signed his solo deal and was preparing his first album. Norman Whitfield was troubled enough by the departures, his and another voice we will discuss, that he wrote a Temptations record directed at both of them. It was called Superstar, Remember How You Got Where You Are, a jab, recorded and released. That is how much the losses stung. But the numbers told a different story. After 2 years of solo singles that missed the top 40, Eddie Kendricks recorded Keep On Truckin' in 1973. It reached #1 on the pop charts. Boogie Down reached #2 in 1974. He became the only former Temptation to score a solo #1 hit in America. And whether Norman Whitfield wrote that jab song to embarrass them or to process his own loss, I think you can already imagine the answer. Eddie Kendricks died of lung cancer on October 5, 1992, without health insurance. Bobby Womack organized benefit concerts to help his family with the medical costs. A man who co-founded the Temptations and scored a solo #1 record died without the resources to fight for his life. Hold that name. It deserves more than a footnote. The second voice from that same group is still ahead. Number 4, The Drifters / the original lineup. George Treadwell was a jazz trumpeter. He managed acts. He was married to Sarah Vaughan, and in the 1950s, he did something that should have been impossible. He owned the Drifters. Not managed, owned. The name The Drifters belonged to George Treadwell, not to the singers performing under it, not to the voices who had given it meaning. He paid the members flat salaries. When they asked for more, he fired them, and because the name was his, they had no recourse. By May of 1958, the group performing as the Drifters had been reduced to working club scenes under multiple group names just to keep working. Their commercial momentum had stalled, and during a week's engagement at the Apollo Theater, one of the members got into a confrontation with the Apollo's MC, Ralph Cooper. George Treadwell fired the entire group, that week, all of them. And then, because he still owned the name, and because he still had a year's worth of Apollo bookings to fill, he found another group, a Harlem vocal group called the Five Crowns, led by a singer named Benjamin Earl Nelson. You know that name differently, Ben E. King. Treadwell renamed them the Drifters overnight. The new lineup initially played to hostile audiences, people who knew these were not the real group. And then Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller produced There Goes My Baby, Strings, a Latin rhythm, something R&B had genuinely never sounded like before. #2 on the pop charts. Save the Last Dance for Me, Up on the Roof, on Broadway, Under the Boardwalk. The original Drifters, the ones who were fired, became the original Drifters and never charted again. And I want to be precise about what this means. The man who fired his entire group in anger in the same week at the Apollo Theater accidentally assembled one of the most successful lineups in the history of R&B. But he did not do it with the people who had given that name its first meaning. He did it by erasing them. What does it mean when a name outlives the people who built it, and the people who built it never get it back?
Number 3, The Supremes, Florence Ballard. Let me tell you who Florence Ballard was, because this name deserves to be said with care. Florence Ballard was the one who brought them together. She grew up in the Brewster Douglas housing projects in Detroit. A teenager with a voice described by Marvin Gaye, who sang beside her as probably the strongest of the three girls. Her vocals were so powerful that during recording sessions, engineers made her stand 17 feet from her microphone. She was the one who found Diana Ross. She was the one who found Mary Wilson. And when this group of young women from the projects of Detroit needed a name for something that would become one of the most successful acts in the history of American music, it was Florence Ballard who chose it. She chose the name The Supremes. She sang on 16 top 40 singles. 10 of those singles reached number 1. And in June of 1967, Berry Gordy renamed the group Diana Ross and the Supremes. On July 1, 1967, the day after Florence Ballard's 24th birthday, she was fired. Berry Gordy's words to her that night, "If you go on stage, I'll throw you off." Cindy Birdsong, who had been secretly traveling with the group for months, learning their routines, stepped into Florence's gown. Florence Ballard went back to Detroit. Motown's initial offer to settle her departure was $15,000. She refused. She eventually accepted $139,804.94, a figure that signed away her rights to the name Supremes and to every royalty she was owed. A crooked attorney later embezzled the remainder of her settlement. She sued Motown for $8.7 million in back royalties. She lost. Her home was foreclosed. By 1974, Florence Ballard, the woman who named the Supremes, who sang on 10 #1 records, was on public assistance. She was filling out welfare paperwork. Florence Ballard died on February 22, 1976. Coronary thrombosis. She was 32 years old. At her funeral, Diana Ross sat with the family inside the church. Outside, fans booed when Diana Ross arrived. Her story later inspired the character of Effie White in Dreamgirls. Jennifer Hudson won an Academy Award for that performance and dedicated it to Florence. The real Florence never received an award. The real Florence received a death certificate at 32. Some of you just went very quiet. That is the right response. Number 2, The Temptations / David Ruffin. You know the song. My Girl has been part of American life since 1965. It is one of those recordings that does not feel like it belongs to any particular decade. It belongs to every room it has ever played in. But knowing the song and knowing the story behind it, those are two different kinds of knowing. Smokey Robinson wrote My Girl specifically for David Ruffin's voice, not for the Temptations collectively, for the specific ache and power and gospel weight of what Ruffin's voice could do.
It became the Temptations' first #1 pop single. Marvin Gaye once said of David Ruffin, "I heard in his voice a strength my own voice lacked." Take a moment with that. From Marvin Gaye. He sang lead on Ain't Too Proud to Beg, on I Know I'm Losing You, on I Wish It Would Rain, on Beauty Is Only Skin Deep. Year after year of defining R&B records, with his voice carrying the front of it. And then, he began to feel that his voice deserved its own recognition. He watched Motown rename the Supremes after Diana Ross. He pushed for David Ruffin and the Temptations. He arrived at concerts in a mink-lined limousine, while the other members shared rides. In June of 1968, after missing a concert date in Cleveland to attend a performance by his girlfriend, Barbara Martin, who was Dean Martin's daughter, the Temptations fired him. He was replaced by Dennis Edwards. Ruffin showed up uninvited at subsequent Temptations concerts. He walked on stage during songs he had originally sung lead on. He took the microphone from Dennis Edwards' hands. The audiences responded every time. The group briefly considered bringing him back. When they gave him the chance, he didn't arrive on time. That was the end. His solo career had real moments. Walk Away from Love reached #1 on the R&B chart in 1975, but the trajectory that should have been there never fully arrived. David Ruffin died on June 1, 1991, a cocaine overdose, a Philadelphia crack house. He was 50 years old. Michael Jackson paid for his funeral. Stevie Wonder spoke at the service. Aretha Franklin was there. The man whose voice Marvin Gaye said carried a strength he himself lacked, died in a crack house at 50, and was buried by the most famous person in the world. That is not a footnote. That is the whole story. And now, I told you in entry number 6, 2 voices, the same group, within 3 years. Eddie Kendricks, David Ruffin, the entire foundation of the era people still speak about with reverence. Gone before that decade was done. The Temptations continued. They had more hits. Norman Whitfield produced brilliant things after both departures. But the music that made your parents stop what they were doing when it came on the radio, that ended here, and it never fully came back. Because some things cannot be replaced, they can only be lost. #1, New Edition / Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown was born in the Orchard Park projects of Roxbury, Boston, Massachusetts. A child who could sing and move in a way that was already remarkable before he was old enough to understand what he had. In 1978, he and his childhood friends, Ricky Bell and Michael Bivins, started singing together. They added Ralph Tresvant and Ronnie DeVoe. A local manager named Brooke Payne found them. In 1982, producer Maurice Starr heard them perform at a talent show at Boston's Strand Theater. They called themselves New Edition because they believed they were a new version of the Jackson 5. Candy Girl went to #1 on the R&B chart. It went to #1 in the United Kingdom. Their self-titled second album sold more than 2 million copies. Cool It Now, Mr. Telephone Man. In 1984 and 1985, New Edition was everywhere. But Bobby Brown was growing, and growing faster than the group's image had room for. He was adding choreography on stage that was more physical, more adult, more him. Management wanted clean, Bobby wanted grown. MCA Records applied pressure, and in December of 1985, under that pressure, the members of New Edition voted. Bobby Brown was out. Michael Bivins later said, "The group regretted it." The next album New Edition released without Bobby was a collection of doo-wop covers that barely went gold. To find their footing again, they recruited a new member, Johnny Gill, and rebuilt around a new lineup for their 1988 album Heartbreak. They found their way back, but they never found what they had given up. Bobby Brown's Don't Be Cruel came out in 1988. Five singles, 5 Billboard Hot 100 Top 10 entries. My Prerogative reached #1. Every Little Step won a Grammy Award for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance. He was the opening act for New Edition's Heartbreak Tour. Let me say that again, so it lands properly. The group that voted him out in December of 1985 had Bobby Brown as their opening act in 1988, on his way to becoming the most commercially successful solo artist to emerge from New Edition, opening for them, while becoming something larger than any of them. That is not a comeback, that is a verdict. Bobby Brown went on to sell millions of records, pioneer New Jack Swing with Teddy Riley, and define the sound of a generation. New Edition, for all their genuine talent, for all the greatness they continue to produce, never had a commercial moment as massive as what they voted out of their group at the end of 1985. They let go of the one who was already becoming what they had always said they wanted to be. And whether that decision makes sense to you, or whether it sits the way these things sometimes sit, like something that should not have been allowed to happen, I think you already know where you land.